Alright everyone, we've got a series of happenings in Venezuela that I think they push the situation from bad to worse. They certainly are not going to help alleviate the situation there. The only alleviation for Venezuela at this point is if the oil price magically doubles. That will solve many of their problems. It's probably also not going to happen. Any spike in oil prices, because the U.S. is set up to pump more out of the ground at any given time when it becomes a little bit more profitable, as soon as it goes up, they discover more oil here in Texas and Alaska and fucking Montana or wherever it happens to be. They start pumping it out because they're like, oh, cha-ching, more free money for us and more energy independence, and OPEC can't really do anything about that. It's like, why do you think OPEC hasn't really throttled their production? Because if the price goes up, the U.S. will just create more. We're the ones with the main advantage in technology to do that. We're also using natural gas. Green energy is taking hold. Our dependence upon foreign oil is waning. And so all these other countries that have set themselves up to feed the industrialized world, with Europe and now China moving towards green energy, us doing the same and also pumping our own oil out of the ground, they're actually kind of screwed. In the next couple of decades, one of the big issues around the world is probably going to become some of these oil-rich states. Unless they've already diversified, they've set themselves up for other types of production, they're going to get screwed. Venezuela probably more than anybody else. What's happened now? First, the Peruvian government has come out and warned of a bloodbath in Venezuela. They see what's coming on the horizon, I think more than most. Being in the same region, you know, being as a part of the same sort of Latin American bloc, they've tried to kick Venezuela out of their organization several times. Peru and Colombia are basically leading the charge there, with Bolivia being the main holdout that's keeping them in, so to speak. What's happening is that the violence is increasing. It's not waning. More people are dying. I think the death toll from the protests is now getting up there. It's more than 60 people. They had a bunch of musicians riot because an 18-year-old violinist actually got shot in the head by some socialist militias there. Next, Maduro has decided to nationalize the police in Miranda province. Miranda province is in basically open rebellion now, held by the opposition. Thus, they instructed their police, if people are protesting, take a back seat, let them protest. What the hell else are we supposed to do? People are starving. They have the right idea, ultimately, which that actually decreases pressure. If Maduro was not a total moron, he would know this. And that being ham-fisted about it, you know, when the fundamental underlying problem isn't going away anytime soon, is probably the worst thing you can do. But he's dumb. He's a socialist demagogue. He's a tin-horn dictator, a tyrant. And so he doesn't know any other way. He's an ignorant man, and all of his remaining very small group of supporters are deluding themselves, thinking the situation is going to get better because you have socialism. Then we had protesters who, I think about a couple weeks ago, they torched Hugo Chavez's childhood home, and they've been attacking like monuments to Hugo Chavez, the man who laid the groundwork for their current level of misery. It wasn't Maduro who laid the groundwork. Maduro just continued the same fucking policies, and then the oil prices went south. It was mainly Hugo Chavez's fault. What's happening in Venezuela. People, I think, are beginning to realize that. They laid siege to the Supreme Court building and managed to set that on fire. Last I knew, it was still standing, but it had been damaged. So people are now openly attacking government buildings in Venezuela. This is looking a lot like Ukraine, maybe in the weeks prior to their revolution there, when they got so upset things were so bad, they said, fuck it. You know, what are we even bothering to live for? You could see a major uprising, an actual revolution. You could see what's currently mostly protest with some scattered riots go into full, you know, panic mode, and the Venezuelan state fall. It is possible for that to happen. It doesn't matter if Maduro deploys the police. It doesn't matter if he calls on the military. At that point, the military may very well switch loyalties, saying, well, there's nothing we can do about it, short of, like, I don't know, are we supposed to kill 50, 100,000 people? What exactly is little Nicholas telling us to do? Now, am I predicting that at this moment? No, I think, unfortunately, you need even more pain and suffering to bring the Venezuelan state down. It's been remarkably, because people are so indoctrinated into thinking that the evil capitalist West wants to destroy them, and that socialism is great, there are still some hangers-on that cling to the mythology that socialism will actually help them long-term, and that this is primarily the fault of the U.S. Sanctioning Venezuela. Sanctions which came from having so many human rights abuses in the past and in the present. If you think that sanctions are your main problem, you should again be trying to get rid of Maduro, because he's the one sicking the police and various militia groups on his own population. The sanctions aren't going to go away regardless of whether you think that those were fair. The real problem is that the oil price dropped worldwide like a rock, and Venezuela is oil reliant. That's the only fundamental underlying issue. If it had a diverse economy, sanctions wouldn't really affect it. It could at least produce its own food and medicine, and it would have no problems. It also wouldn't be an economic pariah that nobody wants to touch or invest in, because Maduro has nationalized several industries, forced several other major industrial firms out. Others have closed up shop because they can't even obtain like sugar to make their fucking Coca-Cola or any of these other things. So you've got half the population out of work, everyone's standing in bread lines with nothing else to do, being bored without electricity. What are they going to do? They're going to go protest. It's something to do. There's nothing else to do in Venezuela at this point. The state of Venezuela is already in a quasi-anarchic state anyway, and Maduro is still clinging to power. Rather than hold an election, he says, oh, we'll draw up a new constitution, one that'll give him unlimited power. I guess his remaining handful of fans think that it's going to solve the how the hell is drawing up a new constitution going to solve the problem of not having enough food? Having an economy that's 85% nothing but crude oil exports. How is it going to solve the problem? That's what I would love to know. Now, what you need to have is an election. The problem is Maduro can't hold one because he'll be out on his ass. The opposition already has major power in their legislature, and their legislative body has basically been defanged by Maduro and his judicial system, but Maduro himself at this point would be out. It would be a tidal wave of support for the opposition. He can't, in a political fashion, he can't survive it, because if he calls an election, he won't be able to respect the results without abandoning socialism and absconding and going into exile in some other country. Probably have to fly to Bolivia or something like that. Knowing him, he'd probably do it on the eve of the election, because he'd already know the result. He'd be like, well, I'm fucked. I'm just going to go fly out to Bolivia, be with my commie friends over there or something. Nation of Bolivia is also fucked up. Although they do have a lot of environmentalism there, so I feel positively towards them on that. It's got a lot of natural beauty, and it's at least not fully collapsed like Venezuela, although all things considered, what the fuck's going to happen in their future. So Venezuela has advanced a stage in its misery. It needs to advance probably one more stage before revolution hits. And it might not take that long. It's only been a few months since the situation before went from bad to worse. It was already bad. How much worse can it possibly get before people begin making makeshift swords and spears and attacking the police with lethal force instead of just throwing rocks and occasionally laying siege to some government building? The opposition there is growing. It's going to continue to grow. I think people's fear of like these armed militias is basically all that's keeping them from revolting. But once people's kids start keeling over, not just being skinny, not just being hungry all the time, not just sitting there sweltering without the benefit of electricity 4 days a week, when people's kids start truly dying of things other than, communicable disease because they can't get medicine, that's when shit is going to hit the fan in the nation of Venezuela. Unless, again, the oil prices suddenly skyrocket by at least 100%, maybe 150%. And if that happens, it's a short-lived 2 or 3 month reprieve before U.S. oil production kicks in and drives the price back down. You're doomed if you don't abandon socialism. If you are in Venezuela, that's my call to you. Your nation is doomed. You won't have a Venezuela anymore. You will regress back to pre-third world stage. You'll become little more than tribalistic. You won't have any development whatsoever. Because all these wonderful goods, the microwaves and toasters and ACs that were paid for by oil sales under Hugo Chavez, that were supposedly a glorious example of socialism don't work very well without electricity. They don't really mean anything if you don't have food to actually store in the fridge that Hugo Chavez subsidized for you. They don't matter. They mean absolutely nothing. It's like having a sports car and then not being able to afford gasoline for it. It's just a piece of metal. It's just gonna sit there. Look showy, yeah, real impressive, wonderful, human development. You can't do anything with it. There's no roads to drive it on. It's full of potholes. Okay, it broke down 2 miles later. Wonderful. Socialism, huzzah. That's what's gonna happen in Venezuela, and by the way, this can happen in other socialized nations. Socialism is largely a cancer. A very small degree of redistribution to take care of the extremely vulnerable is an applaudable thing. It's a wonderful thing for society. The problem is, and this is the inevitable problem, because you have to have bureaucracy to dispense that funding, any more problems down the road, instantly the argument is made, we can solve it if we just have another layer of socialism. And then the next couple of years go by. Oh, we need another layer of socialism. And things march on slowly over time, slowly boiling the frog and making people miserable. At some point, a tipping point is reached. An economy that's showing strain collapses. You have revolution. You end up going to either some sort of outright communism, or you end up regressing into fascism, or people overthrow everything and move to a laissez-faire model, in which case they can get screwed by their neighbors, unfortunately. It's a difficult issue. Venezuela needs help badly. It can't come, by the way, from the U.S. And I've said this, I don't believe we should intervene directly. Not in any way, shape, or form. We'd be greeted as the great Satan. There'd be a hell of a lot of killing going on. It'd look very bad for us. It'd be bad for the Venezuelan people. Let the people in Latin America get involved. Let the Peruvians, the Colombians, the Brazilians, other nations that are already there, let them get involved in Venezuela to put pressure on Maduro. And then let the Venezuelan people overthrow him, put his head on a pike, and parade him through a street. That's what should be done. That's about all. Peace out.